Okay, so recording has started. So welcome everybody. So today we're going to be going over how to use various different types of custom fields in FirePro, how to turn those on, how to identify where they're going to show up, and then the ways that custom fields are going to impact things like reporting and potentially things like viewing capabilities, as well as some of the reports that are tied to different custom fields. If you identify anything in the customization options over the course of this session that you think would be applicable or useful to your FirePro system, please book an appointment through Amanda and we can set up how to go through that. Or if you just want help in turning those things on, you can go ahead and ask Diego through our standard tech support channels. So when we talk about custom fields in the software as a general rule, there are kind of two different levels of custom fields that we will generally see. Pretty much all of the custom fields and custom conventions in the software are controlled through the setup menu in the option called custom settings. This is a permission that has to be activated for specific accounts. The administration or fire chief user has it available by default, but if you don't have access to the setup menu and the related custom settings menu option, then that's something you want to adjust on the specific user profile that you're working under so that it has permission to do these things. It's important to remember that you don't want to give out custom settings or the general setup menu permissions to everybody in the department because you are able to make changes through these settings that affect your entire FirePro system. So discretion is usually the better part of bravery in this case. But the custom settings tool is where you're going to access almost all of the specific custom fields that we're dealing with in FirePro. So when I say that there's kind of two different levels of custom fields that we're dealing with, one of the sort of standard types of custom fields that we see is what we would think of as field labels in the software. So for example, if I go to the incidents tab, there's a tab here called time fields. And this contains all the various different labels for the time fields that we use in the user interface on the incident window side. So we can see that various different departments will call these different time fields different things. And that's often based on a department's dispatch system, how they communicate information, just on internal department usage. It's important to note, especially with things like incident times, that you can change the labels on the fields, but you can't really change what the field means in FirePro. So for example, the called in time is used to identify the time that the 911 call was received initially by dispatch. So in this case, it's called call received. You might call it 911 initiated or something else, but whatever you label it won't change what it means at a fundamental level for record management. Likewise, we can see in some of these response time fields, these are calculated intervals which deal with things like how long it took from the called in time to the alarm time, the amount of time that it took dispatch to page you out. If you put a label in here or you change the label on here, it will generate that time interval in your incident reports and allow you to use it for statistical reporting. And as is the case with many custom fields in FirePro, it will automatically flow this information into some of the standard reports that you might be using. In the case of response time fields, primarily they show up on things like the incident averages report. But again, this will always represent the amount of time between called in and alarm time, regardless of what you call it. So these kind of field labels are pretty common throughout the program. In the custom settings module, you will see them in a lot of places. So for example, if I go into the properties module and I go into my custom fields here, I can see a fair number of labels that we will pre-populate for you with standard label terminology. But in many cases, departments want to go in, change those labels so that the fields are called something different. We could say the owner title, we'd rather call it primary owner, for example. And if you change it here, then that will change it throughout the properties module to show that new information. So in a lot of cases, these custom fields are just going to be pre-labeled for you because they're standard user interface elements that you see all the time. The second types of custom fields, and there's a bit of a range of the different varieties of custom fields that we have available, are what we think of as the true custom fields. And you'll normally see these primarily in the custom fields tab. And if we look through the various different modules here, we can see that the properties has a custom fields, the incidents has custom fields, personnel. Personnel is almost all custom fields, so you start off fairly heavy duty there. So wherever we see a custom field label in the custom settings, that means that in the FirePro user interface, in that module, there is a pre-built field of this type, which is just waiting for you to use it. And all you need to do to get started on using it is give it a label. So for example, if I am in the incidents module, I have a custom list one type. And so in the context of incidents, say I have a couple of different types of incident based on, say, what additional departments I'm paging out on mutual aid. So could do something like mutual aid from, and just add that the label to the custom list. When we look at various different types of custom lists, you're going to be able to tell from the title of the custom list or the custom field what kind of field is going to be generated in the user interface once you label this. So lists are your standard drop-down list. They're going to be editable, just like the regular drop-down list, assuming you have permissions to do that. So in the case of incidents, we have a number of custom lists. We also have what's called a pick many list. I'm going to talk a little bit about this one further down the line, because this is a really interesting new option that we've added to the incident reporting module. But we can also see we have number fields, so custom number titles. These are generally going to be, the field's going to be able to do numbers or parts of numbers, 1.5. In many cases, we'll use this in the context of the payroll systems, if you want to track some sort of number related to payroll. We also have custom checkboxes. So these are yes, no answers. Basically, in this case, we can see we are, again, using a number of these checkboxes, potentially for things related to pay as well in some cases, but also for general reporting purposes. So there are also some other types of fields that we might see. If we look under properties and custom fields, we can see that there are, in some cases, custom reminders. So with properties, you could add an additional reminder to property addresses. We also have what we would call long text titles or just notes titles. Long text is normally going to be a field that allows you to put in quite a bit of text if you have generated that type of field. So different modules are going to have a variety of different custom field options. And generally, these have evolved over time based on the requirements of various different departments. The custom fields location in the custom settings is going to determine pretty much what module these custom fields are appearing under. There are also some labels on these windows that can give you more information about where those custom fields will actually appear on the record when you turn them on. If we look at inspections, for example, the inspections tab, because this is under the properties section, this is going to cause custom checkboxes that appear on the inspections tab of a property. They're primarily intended to be used for FP2 or fire prevention type information. So we could put something in here like, what do you call them? hazardous occupancy or something like that. And this is going to allow you to checkbox specific records and then run reports, run searches on that kind of information. So if we look at this particular example, I've now turned on this custom field label. And if I go into a property record, I can go just pull up any property record here. I picked a department with quite a few property records, so this might just take a sec. Okay, so if I look at an individual property record, now if I look at the inspections tab, I can see that I have a hazardous occupancy tick box available on the form. So if I tick that off, this allows me to, in the properties module, I can do searches for that particular checkbox. Because this checkbox is in the inspections section, the search parameter appears in the inspections tab, and now I have an inspection option that says, okay, only show me hazardous occupancy properties. So this gives me the capability to quickly generate a new field to hold information that I want, and automatically adds that to your search functions so you can use it as a filter when you're trying to find records or trying to generate specific reports. In many cases, these custom fields will also be added to the available columns that you might want to display on your FirePro lists. So for example, the property records for this department have a custom checkbox at the main level, which they have labeled inspectable occupancy. So if I select that inspectable occupancy checkbox, I can have an inspectable occupancy column that displays that information. And again, I have a specific search to show me only properties that are marked as inspectable occupancies. So these kind of custom fields allow you to quickly generate the ability to enter and retain additional information, but also will normally give you the ability to both view that information in various different places and to populate reports or different template views with that info as well. So when we are thinking about additional information, we may well want to consider like the module that the information's in, and it would allow me to potentially, it's going to be like that, to potentially see, in this case, we can see we've got a variety of our custom checkboxes that we saw here earlier. So those custom checkboxes are basically standard custom fields, which the department has selected. And one of the other things that I did when we were looking at the incident custom fields earlier was I added this mutual aid from custom field. So I labeled it. Because I labeled a custom list, the software will generate a list for me. In this case, this list is not populated, so I would still need to, on an individual record, put in list contents. But once those list contents are populated, then any incident, either historical incidents or new incidents going forward, will have this field and this information available to you to use. And in many cases, all the lists are essentially going to work the same. Now, I know probably a number of you have been working in FirePro for a long time, but since we're talking about lists, it's sometimes nice to do a quick review on how the list functions work, just to give people a refresher. So if you're working on creating a brand new list in FirePro, and again, these are entered through the little ... button. If the lists are editable, the ... button will allow you to make changes to the list contents. If I want to add a new list entry, I just use the green plus button. Now, broadly speaking, there's two different ways that your lists can be organized when you're generating. So if you're just looking for a list that is organized alphanumerically, it doesn't really matter to you what order the list items go in, you can leave this order field at 0 and just put in the first thing. right? And if I do the second thing, I may or may not, yeah, I may or may not get the same sorting on there because again, this is an alphanumeric sort. So it will sort things according to the alphanumeric structure of the actual text entries. So this will just automatically sort the list for you based on the contents of the list entries. In some cases, though, you might want to override the alphanumeric sort on a list. For example, if we're dealing with response types, there's a whole bunch of response types. They have associated codes with them, and the codes are important, as is the order of these. We can see these are not organized alphanumerically based on the text. That's where the order field comes in. So the order field is an override to the alphanumeric sorting, but you only need to use it if you want to arbitrarily sort the list as opposed to letting it sort automatically. When I am populating a list, normally what I'll do is I'll put in, if I do want to do arbitrary sorting, I will generally put in my order entries in intervals of 10. This is just a reflex for me, but what it allows you to do is that if you need to go back to this list later on and put an entry in between 1 and 2, you can say, okay, well, this is the 1.5 thing. I'm going to put it in as a 15, first 0.5, and that will then pop it into the list in the place that you want, as opposed to you having to arbitrarily go in and resort the list. Again, this is only critical if you're dealing with a list that you want to order manually. Another thing that you can do with these lists is that you can set default entries. So if I set something in here as the default, it means that that will be picked automatically whenever I create a new record in this module. And we can see that, for example, in the dispatch section, where this particular department gets all their calls from fire dispatch, and that's their standard. So they set that as the default. And that means that if you go in to create a new record, then what we see there is dispatch has been selected automatically on the list, and mutual aid, first 0.5, has been selected automatically because those are the standards, the defaults that you've set. It's important to remember that if one of the potential options in a list is nothing, then it's not usually a great idea to set a default for it, unless nothing doesn't happen very often. So for example, if we look at something like the police drop-down list in here, even if there is only one police force that serves your area, you normally wouldn't want to set that as the default because it's very possible that there's no police on scene for some calls. So you have it available, but if you set the default, then that will always be set to RCMP, even if RCMP were not on scene, and then you'd have to go in and clear it instead of selecting. So it's just kind of a matter of determining, is it useful to have a default for these fields or not? So the things like the default structure in combination with things like custom lists can allow you to pretty quickly populate forms with some of the standard information that might need to be entered all the time, rather than you having to put it yourself. Now, when we are looking at things like these custom fields, these custom fields, in many cases, are going to be made available right away to you in things like the list window. So again, when I look at this mutual aid from field, now that I've added it and populated it, I have it available as a column that I could display on the window. And if I populate the record with something in there, then that will go ahead and see that. That's a good one. I love that. So that's going to allow me to quickly see the results of that output. So the custom lists and additionally custom checkboxes can be really helpful in that regard. They will also, as I said, normally generate specific search parameters that you can use in order to break out specific pieces of information where, okay, I want to see, I'll just close this and reopen it because we just populated the list. So if I go in and say last year, let's say last 24 months, and I want to go into my details and say, show me all my mutual aid from, for example, not blank, and run that search, and I'm getting error messages because I'm using a development version. We'll pop onto a different module and see how that goes there. So in the cases like pieces of data like the inspection checklists, where I can say, show me only my hazardous occupancies, that's going to allow me to quickly run reports on things. There are also some reports which are specifically tied to the custom fields. A good example of that is the function that we call geographic area. So the geographic area custom fields allow you to take your property records, break them out into a variety of different sub areas, which might lay over top of information like property or specific fire department response area, and then use that in a variety of different reports. So in this case, what we can do is I'll just clear my search parameters, look for everything. And once I've got all my property records up, I can take a quick look at my geographic areas so I can see what geographic areas the properties are assigned to. And this is going to be something that you may commonly do for any type of custom field that you're generating. You can say, okay, I want to see what properties are in here and see which areas are attached to what geographic area. So this allows me, in terms of the geographic area, to, this is a customizable field where I can populate it with my own data and then assign properties to these various different geographic areas. So one of the primary things that this does is allow you to search for properties by geographic area. But what this particular custom field also does is it takes incidents and assigns those incidents to different custom field, different geographic areas automatically based on the individual properties. And I'm just going to pop into somebody else who's using something slightly different for custom fields. And so this is going to allow you to look at your larger property set and quickly take the incidents that are assigned to those properties and then run reports on them. And this is something that we see throughout the custom field capability in the software, where you can put in the custom fields and those custom fields will automatically be added to specific reports and outputs. So let's just check on geo area here. Yeah, okay, this is a good example. So if I wanted to set up geo areas, I could go into my custom settings, in my properties under custom fields. In this case, I have a geo area tab, which is going to let me hide or display the geo area tab. And that means that in my property side, if I search for specific properties, I can create a list of geographic areas, area 1, 2, 3, 4, for example. If I wanted to then assign specific properties to those geographic areas, I can look up and see which properties are assigned to which geographic areas. I can sort results by geographical areas. Not sure why there's a dot geographical area, but hey, that's fine. So we can see there's a large number of residentials, different sub areas are set up. Because these property records will then pass the geographic area down to the individual incidents, it means that I can also look on incidents, see a specific set of incidents, and check the related geographic area for those incidents. And I know geographic area is here somewhere. So we can see, based on the property records, this is the geographic area that all these incidents are in. And this information then flows into a variety of standardized reports. In this case, the totals by geographic location report. This kind of report is really, really handy if you are, say, doing responses in multiple areas under various different mutual aid agreements or fire protection agreements, and you want to quickly run reports that show how many calls and how much time was I spending in each one of my different areas. So geographic location is a good example of the use of a customizable field, which then flows out into reporting capability throughout the program. So when we are thinking about things like custom fields, we will often want to think about, okay, what module do I need to use a custom field in? Do I currently have access to this particular kind of data? And where do I need to go to put in this kind of information? I just want to see this one. Right. So what we have done recently in terms of an example of a new custom field is in the incidents module under the custom fields tab, there's an option called the pick many list title. And what this is set up to do is let you set a bunch of additional pieces of information that you might want to add to an incident report that you want to use for statistical reporting, and essentially build it out on the incident report. So I'm just going to put a label on this pick many list, and what that's going to do is if I look at any individual incident report, I will then see an additional information tab that appears down at the bottom here. So the additional information tab is a customizable list. It's a little bit different from a standard drop-down list in that this is a pick many list. So I could say this is a related, for example, I could put in a variety of other things where, I'll put in a 10 there. So requested info. So I can put in a variety of different items in this pick many list, and then for each individual incident, I can tick off one or more of these items. So what that's going to do for me is that once I start to use that and tick those items off on incidents, I can then run what we call stats based on additional information. So I can say, okay, let's do a smaller time period here. I'm just going to go to December of last year. And so when I run that stats based on additional information, it's going to give me a breakdown about how many times that particular item was selected. In this, essentially, what percentage of my calls was this an issue on? So this custom tool is designed to give you some flexibility. If you have some specialty needs, but you don't want to necessarily have a bunch of additional drop-down lists that you use, you can put in the pick many list and use it for things like that. We also have in our custom settings the ability to modify some of the standard functions about how FirePro calculates stuff. So for example, if I look at my personnel, actually, let's look at the validation function here. In the validation section of incidents, I have the ability to do things like generate warnings based on specific data entry that you've entered. And I also have the ability to, let's see, I think it's under personnel. Figure out where that one is. We have the ability to say, okay, I want to do some checking in incidents based on people showing up in certain amounts of time. Sure, that was in, oh yeah, sorry, benchmarks. Okay, so in the benchmark section, I have the ability to do this thing called check for X firefighters in X minutes. This is a standard calculation tool where I can set how many firefighters I want to flag for on scene and how many minutes I want to calculate that out. So if you populate that information with benchmarks that are relevant to your department requirement, they will automatically start to show up in terms of have we met those specific requirements. This particular custom setting is actually designed to work only for response types that you have selected. So if I select specific response types here, I can say these are response types that I want to factor in for that, because in many cases, you're not going to be particularly worried about that benchmark for things that are not, say, fires, for example, or motor vehicle accidents or medical type responses. You can also run more dynamic reports, which look for this stuff more based on the specific incidents you've selected, but that kind of customization is something that's available and part of the standard custom setting capability in the program. Another level of the custom configuration that you can use is the ability to show or hide specific pieces of information depending on your department's requirements. So if we look at the incidents module as an example here, we can see that in the incidents general tab, I have the ability to hide specific tabs in the system. So for example, if your department is not using the FirePro data entry capabilities for medical reports, you are not logging that inventory is being used on scene, or at least not through FirePro, and you're not doing fire investigations in the software, you can hide those tabs, and as a result, they will not show up on the incident report. So when I look at a specific incident, I no longer see the medical tab. I no longer see the inspections tab. It reduces the amount of potential data entry by hiding things that you're not using. So this is going to be something that you can use to reduce the amount of stuff that you might see on a FirePro incident report, for example. So those are also some of the different custom options that are in there that are a little bit different from what we would consider the standard custom fields. And once you wrap your head around how the custom fields work, it becomes really easy to identify the custom fields that you have available and where those custom fields might be showing up. So in this case, if I pop into the inspections tab, I can immediately see that I have custom dates that I can add to inspection records. I can add custom numbers in here, and I can modify some of my default amounts. Likewise, the personnel module specifically is an area where there's a lot of custom fields, because in many cases there can be quite a bit of additional custom data that you might want to enter for your individual members. And we can see that in the personnel side, there's a lot of custom fields. And so I could do something like fact date. So once I label this custom date field, if I go into a personnel record, most personnel records in the firefighter module or the personnel module are going to be populated on the custom tab. This is because there are so many custom fields in the personnel module. We don't make you go around and look for stuff in the various different tabs. They just all appear in the custom section. So this tab can essentially be customized with a bunch of additional information that you might want to fill out related to individual members of the department. So those custom fields, and those custom fields will then print on standard reports if you're printing detailed reports, and in some cases become searchable capabilities in the system as well. So kind of covers the range of things that we're dealing with custom fields generically. I am happy to open up the floor for questions. If you want to take yourself off mute or put a question in the chat, we can go over any specific questions that people might I'm going to go ahead and stop recording then. So.